Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the country. And welcome to How to Create a Real Mac App Step-by-Step Guide. My name is Ian Barker, and I'm the developer advocate for Embarcadero Systems. If you want to get in touch, you can email me there at ian.barker@embarcadero.com. Well, we've got a lot coming up for you. It's a busy time. I seem to have committed myself to doing a webinar every single Tuesday. We've also got a few on Fridays as well. Today we are going to be doing how to create a real Mac app step-by-step guide. That's today. This Friday, or the next webinar, is about Codelex. Now, Codelex is a very, very interesting product. It's from a company called GDK and allows you to do some very interesting things to do with your business logic. If you're not sure what business logic is, then maybe you should come along and watch the webinar. If you do know what it is, then if I tell you that Codelex is going to really transform the way you look at things, then it's worth doing. It's going to be presented by Marco from GDK, and we're also going to have a special guest. So come along on Friday. It's going to be I think roughly the same time, but just sign up to the normal webinars and you should receive your little reminder. That's the word I'm looking for. Okay, well, the very first thing you need to do with the Mac app, and today's going to be quite a busy webinar, so I'm going to skip through a few steps. A lot of what we are talking about today with Mac apps also applies to iOS apps, because obviously they're also from Apple as well. You need to, before you can do absolutely anything at all, is sign on to Apple's developer portal. And if you go to the URL that I've got listed there at the bottom, developer.apple.com, and use your Apple ID, you'll be able to sign up. It will cost you some money. It's not free. There are two types of developer account. There's the regular Apple developer account for normal mortals, people like you and me and others. And then there's another one called an Apple Enterprise Developer Account. That costs more money in US dollars. That's $299 for the Enterprise Developer Account. And the regular one costs $99. The Enterprise Developer Account is used for really for big companies where they're writing applications that are used by their staff exclusively, and the regular developer account is for people that want to sell apps to anybody or use them for their own purposes, and to get them into the iOS and the Mac app stores. Good news is, to do Macs, you don't need an Apple Enterprise Developer account. However, if you are going to do enterprise apps, then yes, you will need to sign up. But generally speaking, if you're just going to create regular Apple Mac apps, then go on there and read through the details. There are ways of getting free accounts and things like that, and I think they do some educational accounts as well. But generally speaking, you're going to be spending $99 and signing up. It's open to anyone, unless you've been barred, and off you go. But yeah, you're saving a little bit of money there. You must have, no matter what you do, you must have Xcode installed, and it must be working on the Mac. Now, that Mac doesn't have to be your own Mac. It could be someone else's Mac. If you work in a company and there's someone with a Mac, you can get Xcode installed on that Mac, and then install a thing called PA Server, which we'll talk about in a minute, on their Mac. And most of the time they won't know that anything's going on, because they can just have a window minimized, and you can install PA Server that way. They would need to sign up with your credentials, so it's got to be someone that you work with or you trust. If you're using company credentials, that makes it a lot easier. But you can also use some of the services that we've found, like Mac in Cloud and Mac Stadium, that give you a hosted cloud-based Mac. And you can put PA Server on those machines. In fact, those cloud providers actually come with them pre-installed. And I know certainly with Mac in Cloud, they try to keep up to date. And if you have got an older version of PA Server on your Mac in Cloud account, if you talk to their support, they used to upgrade it. I haven't used them for about a year, but certainly that's what they used to do. They would upgrade PA Server for you, so that it was the latest version. Your PA Server that's installed needs to match your version of RAD Studio. So if you're using RAD Studio 12, then you need the PA server that matches that RAD Studio. If you're using RAD Studio 11.1, for example, then you would need the PA server that matches that. They have to match up. How do you set up PA server? Well, follow the instructions on the mobile help wizard. I know it seems weird and counterintuitive, but that actually will work. It'll tell you how to copy PA server to the Mac. Essentially, there's a file called PA server and then a number. The number will be the version number of the PA server. It comes at a .pkg, and you put that onto your Mac, copy it over there. The mobile wizard will tell you where to find it, but it's the same PA server whether it's for iOS or for Mac OS. Copy it onto your Mac and run it. Once you double click the PA server, once you've got it installed, you double click and it opens a terminal window, a bit like the command window in Microsoft Windows or DOS prompt, but it's obviously Unix because this is Mac. Double click on there, a terminal window will open. It'll ask you for a password. And once you put in the password, make sure you note it down. So if you use a complicated password, you're going to need to reuse that later. So make sure you've got that password stored somewhere. And I suggest that what you do is one of the commands is the letter I. Press the letter I, and that will give you the current IP address of your Mac. My Mac is set up so that at random times the IP address will change. I also have a network that will randomize my IP addresses as well. It's to prevent hacking. You can do a thing called a permanent assignment or a permanent lease for an IP address that makes it easier. So if you're on a network, that probably happens already. But if you're not sure when you run PA server on your Mac, just press that I and that will give you your IP address. You're going to need that later unless you're using machine names for the servers. When you get to PA server and you type I, you note down the IP address, and then we are going to use it in RAD Studio. So swap back to your PC, and then in the search bar at the top there, type in SDK. This is the easiest way to find it, and click on enter. You'll get a little drop down of different commands. You want the SDK manager page. That will take you here. Click on connection profile manager and click on add. What you're adding here is the connection to that Mac IP address that you noted down earlier on. The platform, it should automatically notice what it is, but if not, select Mac OS and the one that works for you. I actually have an ARM Mac because I've got a Mac M1, but it doesn't matter, it will still work. Host name is either the name of the Mac if you've got host names enabled, or the IP address of the Mac, depending on how you've got it set up. If your Mac is called something like My Mac or Ian's Mac or something like that, in the host name you can put the name. The port number, just leave it as it is, and then the password, put in a password that's secure. In my case, I was doing a little demo there, and it's a one-letter password. Don't do that, because you're exposing a port across your network. You don't want to get hacked. While you're doing that, once you've got everything working, click on Test Connection. Assuming that everything's set up properly, then it will say Succeeded. And at that point, you're talking to the Mac. That means it's working and everything's ready to go. There is another step though. You need to now go onto the SDK manager, which you saw earlier on, and click on Add. When you click on Add, you are connecting to the Mac connection profile, and you will select the SDK version. So as you can see at the top, my Mac is a Mac OS ARM 64-bit. I'm going to use my Mac M1 connection, which is to a specific IP address on the specific port, which we set up earlier on in the connection, and then I'm going to choose the SDK version. Now, at the time that I'm recording this, the latest version of Mac OS is Mac OS 14.2, but this will change. If you're seeing this in a year's time or something like that, it could be 15 or whatever. You know how Apple do. Every so often it happens that they upgrade, and you'll get a new version of the operating system. I tick on the box that says make the selected SDK active. The reason you would need that is you can have more than one SDK. Now, it's outside the scope of this webinar how you download SDKs, but it is possible to load SDKs for earlier versions. It depends on Xcode, and actually by the time you watch this video, things could change, because Apple do have a tendency to just change things as they see fit and make life difficult for us. but it is possible to have more than one SDK. The same is true of iOS. If you saw my video about making a real iOS app, all of this applies. It's all the same thing. Go in there and choose the iOS SDK. I personally find that most Apple devices, just because of the way they work, are on the latest version unless the hardware's out of date. And this happens more with Mac OS. It's very typical to find a Mac that is using an older version of an SDK. With iPhones, they tend to be, either the very latest SDK or the one just before it. It's something that doesn't happen with Android. With Android apps, you very typically will find a very broad selection of different SDKs, different versions of Android operating system. But on Macs, you might have a couple of different versions. On iOS, you might not even have many more than one amongst your customers. It's a judgment call which ones you support. Obviously, the lower you go with the support, then the more compromises you make in terms of features. And some of the latest features are only supported in later SDKs. So it's up to you. Do what you think works. But my advice is always target the latest one, and you'll be fine. Download the SDK. Well, once you click on OK on that previous screen, something will happen. You'll see a load of things whizzing across your machine. Okay, and in my case, it's 46 things. These are the header files, and the C programmers out there and the C++ programmers out there amongst you will recognize where it says xlocale.h there, but for the file name, that is a C++ header file or a C header file, and that's what it's getting down. So it's getting down the definitions that link to the actual SDK itself. That's used for the compiler so that we can produce applications and compile them on the Windows machine, and it updates your local cache. And as you can see here, in my case, it's putting it into my OneDrive, Documents, Embarcadero Studio SDKs. It just depends on what machine and where you actually store your temporary files and things like that. It's a cache. If you get any questions about files that are already existing, what I do is I always click on yes to all. I have to confess, I don't know what the effect of that is. All I know is that when I do it, everything works as normal afterwards. So I don't know whether you should say no or no to all, but I always say yes to all, and it works for me. If you're not sure, if you get a problem, then drop me a line in .barker@embarcadero.com, and I'll try and answer the questions and see what we can say. Eventually, though, it's going to come back and say operation completed. If there are any errors in the log section, then try again. At that point, you're done. That's it. That's all you need to have your Mac apps created on a Windows machine using RAD Studio, and you'll be able to compile and deploy them. It's as simple as that. Now, the next thing we're going to do is do a demo. I'm going to show you how we create a Mac app for real, and how we deploy that over to the Mac, and what happens after that. Okay, so what we're going to do now is actually create a Mac app. I'm going to start by multi-device application, blank application, click on OK. Now, what I'm going to do is go to the palette. I'm going to pick a few components. The first component I want is a panel, and I'll show you why in a moment. Put that at the top. Let's make that certain height. Let's go for, let's have it 65. Yeah, that's about right. And then we're going to say, where do we want it? We want it at the top, like this. So that's aligning it at the top of the page. What else do we need? Well, we need a button. So let's go to the palette and choose a button. Not difficult. I'm going to put that in here like that. And we are going to make our button a specific size as well, so that it looks good. So let's say height 27. So I think that might be a little bit too small. So let's just make it look pretty like that. And we're going to put a caption on the button, and we're going to say, and because this is multi-device, show date. We're just going to save our project for a second. We're going to call it a hack app, because we can. And we're going to save that. And we're going to call it my Mac app, like so. And what else do we want? We want a switch, or will become clear now. If you watched my webinar before for Windows, this is all going to look very, very familiar. And the last thing we want is a label, which we are going to put up here, like so. And we are going to hit F11, and we're going to say text horizontal align. We want it to be trailing. That just means it's going to be aligned to the right. Oops. Like so. Just put it there like that. And we're going to say on the label, we're going to call it dark. Now, if you watch my Windows webinar, this is all going to sound very, very familiar, isn't it? Dark. Okay. And the final thing we want is we want a calendar control, like so. And we want this to look beautiful. So we're going to say client. And that's going to stretch like that because the toolbar at the top is aligned to the top, and then the client area, when we say aligned to the client area, it fills the rest of the gap. Okay, so far so good. What else do we want to do? Well, let's make sure that we're actually targeting our Mac first. I'm going to say on Mac OS ARM, and style is a Mac OS, by the way. So all looking good so far. Now, if I compile that, after a few seconds, you'll find it's compiled. Okay, and so it's successful down there. That doesn't mean to say it's running on the Mac, it just means that it's working. Now, if you want to, we can hit F9, and what will happen is it will launch on the Mac. So it's deploying. What that means is it is sending that, it's talking to PA server, if you remember PA server, and it's sending the app down to the Mac. And then if I go onto my Mac, app running on the Mac. Now, right now it doesn't do anything, and that doesn't do anything. So we need to put some code behind there, but you get the general idea. And if you see, you can see that it is a proper Mac app, because there it says Mac app. This is how Mac menus work. Window, yes, I can make it move to the left of the screen, all the rest of it. I can also make it maximize. And yes, it does look correct. The slight delay, by the way, is because I'm doing this via remote desktop down to my Mac, but there's a proper Mac app. Now, that's all very well and good. But what we want to do is go back to our RAD Studio, and we actually want to make it do something. So first of all, let's add some code for the button. So what we're going to do, double click on here and add this line. All this does is shows a message, formats the date and time to be the long time, and it's going to be whatever date is selected on the calendar. So if I run that, deploys to the Mac. There it is. And if I click on that button, It's usually down the 16th. If I pick this one, it's the 2nd of March. There's the 2nd of March. And so it is actually doing something. So already we've got a Mac app that does actually do something. You notice that the dialog as well is Macintosh style dialog, and it's working. Close that and go back to our IDE. It looks a bit ugly at the moment, and it's kind of grey and boring. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 2 other controls, and those are stylebooks. So this is number 1, and we're going to call that dark style. And we're going to add another one. Now, there are ways of doing this more dynamically than I've done here. Oh, I'll make that visible. But we're going to call this light star. Now, if you don't know what stars are, they allow the program to be the skin, shall we say, the look and feel of the program to be changed automatically. I'm going to use 2 specific ones. So I'm going to go into dark style, and I've got this pre-set up here, but I'm going to use the impressive dark Mac style for the dark style. And you see down here are all the styles. I'm going to close this and it will say, do I want to save it? Yes, I do. And then for the light style, I'm going to double click again, and I'm going to open this. And I'm going to choose, again, these are premium styles that that you can get from Get It. Light style. Yes. Okay. And what we're going to do is go to the form by selecting it. You can do it in the structure here. And in the style book, we will choose light style by default. Okay, so you can see there's a pretty color there for the light style. Save my project. Okay, and if I instead chose the dark style, you can see it's a dark style. So that's interesting, but not very cool. So what we're going to do is go into here, and we're going to write a bit of code. So let's just get rid of these things which really bug me. And we're going to create a thing. I'm going to paste some code in here, because I've done that to create the make the presentation shorter. Set the theme. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to say if this is set to true, then it's going to use dark mode, and if it's set to false, then we're going to use the light mode. And then the other thing we need to do is go into the switch and say on the events, there's a switch event. It's like a click event for a switch, and we're just going to say put a semicolon on the end. Depending on the value of the switch, we're going to use dark style or light style. Okay. Hit F9. It compiles on the machine and links it all up using the compiler on the Windows machine. It then deploys it, which means it's copying it over to the Macintosh using the PA server, which is a specialized server that runs on the Mac. And I told you earlier on about how to install all of that, and you've seen it before on iOS. And it signs a package, and then eventually, if I go into it, there is your app. If I now do this, ta-da! Dark mode, light mode, and there's the date as well. All very clever stuff. And that really is the long and short of what to do. Now, you might say, well, that's great. I mean, but wouldn't it be good if when the app ran, instead of having to switch it manually, it should work out whether it's light mode or dark mode anyway. And my Mac is actually set to dark mode. If you see the taskbar there, it's set to a dark. So we're going to go in and we're going to add a little routine that I wrote called and here say file project add called FMX dark mode. Okay, there it is. What this is an FMX unit, and it uses the FireMonkey platform services, or the RTL runtime library platform services, to ask the operating system, do you support dark mode? Now, the reason that it's set up with this conditional compilation, you can see here that it's grayed out some things. The reason is that this unit will work on Mac and Windows. Now on Windows you don't have this platform services for the, currently anyway, you don't have the platform services to say whether it's a dark mode or light mode. So in Windows at the moment we use a little bit of a trick, and that is to read the registry and see what the actual mode is. But if I go in here and I say Alt 11, that's telling me to use a unit. I'm going to say use dark mode and say implementation. Okay, and then if I go down into the form crate, so if I do this and then again select the form itself, and in the form create event, which is here, all I need to do now is call that function that says dark mode is enabled, which is this. And if dark mode is enabled, it will then set the theme depending on whatever the default value of the theme is. So if we start off and we can see it's light, if I now run the app, it links it again on my Windows machine. It then will deploy it over to my Mac and runs on my Mac. And after a couple of seconds, the app will run. And there you can see, even though by default I've got it set to light mode, it's detected that it's dark mode and it's turned the switch to the right way. Cool, huh? So your app now detects dark mode and light mode in Mac. But what's more important as well is if I close this app out and go back to the source code, this source code will now work on Windows as well. And so the app that I showed you last time that we did Windows will actually work cross-platform. So it's virtually the same app as we did in how to create a Windows app, except now it's cross-platform. Okay, so now we will move on to the Q&A section where I'll be answering the questions live. Over to me.